Japan Journal, the internet's #1 English language weekly online cybercast from Japan. Japan Journal with MalAdams. Good day, everyone, wherever you are in the world. This is Japan Journal, the internet's #1 weekly English language online cybercast from Japan. Japan Journal with yours truly, MalAdams. Japan Journal is covering the election issues that matter to you. Support our work by liking this channel and clicking the notification bell icon so that you'll become a subscriber and be notified every time we post a video. Thank you very much. On tonight's program, Senator Cory Booker was concerned and relentless. It was Wednesday, the third day of confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett, and Booker had just asked her about a study by the U.S. Sentencing Commission discussing the profound racism exercised against Black Americans who enter the criminal justice system.
And you said you were not familiar with that particular study, as you just reaffirmed, or the facts that they cite in the study showing that interracial bias is present in our system. And you know, I think in our discussion, I think it came out that you know that these issues of bias in our criminal justice system are manifest really in many different aspects of the system, from police misconduct, unlawful use of force, to prosecutor bias, sentencing disparities. These are wide and vast areas that have been shown to have such implicit racial bias evident in them. And this year, clearly, we've been grappling as a nation with a lot of these issues. And it is a part of our long-standing history. You cannot divorce the role of judges in our history over these some 200 years and how race has been a persistent part of the national narrative, grappling with deep issues of bigotry and bias, overt as well as the biases that exist. We know that many of the unjust deaths of unarmed African Americans at the hands of law enforcement have brought this even more into public concern. And so I just want to ask you, and maybe give you more of a chance to discuss. I understand that you weren't aware of specific studies I cited, which are central to the important work of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, which advises federal judges or provides recommendations to federal judges. So I just want to give you an opportunity today to share what studies, articles, books, law review articles, or commentary you have read regarding racial disparities present in our criminal justice system.
Barrett replied by explaining that she knows the commission issues guidelines and studies, but Booker homed in on his original point.
It's not something, I'm certainly aware of it. I think it's kind of an obvious point that there's no racism.
But forgive me for interrupting, and I'm especially concerned because of Joni Ernst, who's been teaching me about Iowa Nights. I do not want to get her mad. I was actually asking specifically any books you can name that you've read on this subject, or law review articles, anything that you specifically read outside of the sentencing guidelines.
This was all following up on Booker's questioning of Barrett from Tuesday, which had followed up in turn on a meeting between the senator and the nominee before the hearing, at which he said he'd brought up the U.S. Sentencing Commission study. On Tuesday, Barrett said she wasn't acquainted with the study particularly, but that she was aware of many studies that expound upon implicit bias in the criminal justice system. Now, after she'd had another 24 hours to prepare, he was asking her for more detail about those studies.
Well, Senator Booker, I would say that what I have learned about it has mostly been in conversations with people, and, you know, at Notre Dame, as at many other universities, it's a topic of conversation in classrooms, but it's not something that I can say, yes, I've done research on this and read X, Y, and Z.
I respect that. You've answered the question.
It wasn't unusual for Barrett not to have an answer in the hearings, but it was striking for her to admit she didn't have one. Most of Barrett's performance in her 2 days of questioning revolved around her telling the senator she was duty-bound not to answer their questions about what she thought or believed about various essential subjects in the name of preserving her judicial objectivity on future matters of controversy. From the early going on Tuesday, it was apparent that racism would be one such matter. Senator Dick Durbin asked Barrett for her thoughts as a self-styled originalist interpreter of the founder's constitutional text about the past and present role of racism in the country's life. The founders, after all, he says, included people who owned enslaved Africans. Durbin added that as an originalist who obviously has a passion for history, I can't imagine that you could separate the two to reflect on the history of this country. Where are we today when it comes to the issue of race? Some argue it's fine. Everything's fine and you don't have to even teach children about the history of slavery or discrimination. He also said that there's implicit bias in so many aspects of American life that we have to be very candid about and address. Others go further and say, no, it's systemic racism that's built into America, and we have to be much more pointed in our addressing it. How do you feel? He asked her. Racism, that is, was too important a subject for her to say how she would think about it if she becomes one of the country's most powerful reviewers of policy. For all the talk about theories of constitutional interpretation, legal decisions are guided by a judge's or a prosecutor's personal moral compass and how they've followed that compass to interpret and apply the law. Barrett and her friendly Republican questioners repeatedly invoked her wisdom as a mother of 7 children, but people concerned about racial inequality in the country would just have to trust her to get the problem right, even if, as it turned out, she hadn't taken the time to do the reading on the subject. Her record on cases involving racial discrimination, inasmuch as she would talk about it, was likewise confounding. During Tuesday's questioning, Booker asked Barrett about a 2019 case where she and 2 other judges upheld the firing of Terry Smith, a black man from Illinois who was suing his former employer for workplace discrimination. Part of Smith's case involved his former boss, Lloyd Colbert, allegedly calling him the N-word. In the panel's dissent, Barrett wrote that Smith, quote, introduced no evidence that Colbert's use of the N-word changed his subjective experience of the workplace, end quote. She added that, quote, the N-word is an egregious racial epithet. She said that Smith can't win simply by proving that the word was uttered. He must also demonstrate that Colbert's use of this word altered the conditions of his employment and created a hostile or abusive working environment. She does not consider that a supervisor calling a black employee a nigger unequivocally makes the workplace hostile. Barrett defended the decision on Tuesday by once again defaulting to technicality, saying Smith did not tie the use of the N-word into the evidence that he introduced for his hostile work environment claim. Her adherence to technicality popped up a 3rd time during Booker's time on Wednesday. He inquired about a blog post she'd written in 2008 regarding federal correction to the racial disparities in crack cocaine sentencing. In that post, Barrett didn't address the racism embedded in the disparity and who shoulders that injustice, a key missing piece that gave Booker pause.
I guess I'm just saying that you're not citing articles or research that you've read on this issue, yet you have written here about it. And to me, that speaks, it makes me wonder and want to talk to you a little bit about your preparedness and priorities, taking the highest office in the judicial world that deals with such long-standing issues of race and in a way that affects the totality of the lives of Americans in every aspect of their life, from their financial well-being to their rights to vote. And I'd like to go through as quickly as I can in my remaining 10 minutes a little bit about the vastness of this problem and why I'm very concerned that you haven't even cited anything that you've read that would speak to this, or the only writings I could find on it don't even talk to the injustice of it all.
Under questioning and in the spaces she left around her answers, what Barrett revealed was that she has no true understanding of racism. She can't square being an originalist with addressing racism because she doesn't consider racism. She hasn't read any books or articles about racial disparities in the criminal justice system because she doesn't have to critically think about racism, despite issuing opinions in cases where it is a prominent feature. Here we are in the backdrop of the largest period of demonstrations in the history of the United States, greater than any in the civil rights movement, where millions of Americans, often in predominantly, if not all white towns, are coming out to protest issues of race, which is what Booker added. He said on Thursday that, as I was surprised in this backdrop where issues of race are so important to the Supreme Court that we had a nominee who can't even talk to a law review article that they wrote. End quote. And so there you have it. This is MalAdams reporting live from Japan on Japan Journal. We invite you to stay tuned for more from this YouTube channel on issues of interest to African Americans in particular and people of color in the diaspora in general. Thank you for watching. Wherever you are in the world, be safe and be well. Good day. Japan Journal, the Internet's #1 English language weekly online cybercast from Japan. Japan Journal with MalAdams.